I think we should do a recap for the Homeless No More team so that they know everything that has happened during COVID.
There's all these things that are popping up and keep popping up.
Yeah.
So prevention, we did secure some funding to hire a person that would do some coordination of agencies as well as some program models. So from this summer, we did run a program, and it didn't impact a huge number of youth, but our folks were able to run a decent program. But coming out of that now, Leslie is designing models that we can share. We can share with agencies, with communities, with schools, whoever wants to get on board to do prevention programming. If that results in safe spaces in different places throughout the valley, or preventative programming for younger kids, all the better. So what you're going to do with Engage Nova Scotia will lend itself to that really well. So why don't you tell them what's happening with Engage Nova Scotia?
So I'm in the process of building a youth community engagement team, and it would be part of their job to do community awareness in the schools, but partly also work with me and a few others on creating kind of like a town hall event. So to give a report back to the community about what's happening around youth homelessness in the valley, but also just quality of life stuff, because that's what Engage Nova Scotia has tons and tons of data on. So the goal would be to let everybody know what we're doing and where we're at and where we're headed, but also pull in a bunch of other community organizations, hopefully some municipality partners and some politicians, so that there's this really good across the valley understanding of where we're at with homelessness and where people can engage in the process of solving those things. Ideally, we will have like one event, let's say in Kentville, but this will be live streamed to Windsor, to Middleton, with like a panel discussion, very interactive as well as informative, and then having those community partners in each of those locations. But the key to that is including the youth in the process, so that their voice is heard, and that we're also just hitting the mark on all of those things. So that's really exciting. And then the other huge piece of that is actually the PIT count. So we're calling it the PIT count, which is not actually technically what it's supposed to be called. Service-based agency count. So ideally, what is going to happen is in the month of October, all the service agencies that are signed up will be tallying and getting actual data on how many people are experiencing homelessness in the valley for the month of October. We'll have actual data that is done by researchers at Acadia, and this will be our mark for where we're at now, and then they're also going to repeat the process every 2 to 3 years, so we know if what we're doing is working and where to kind of go with next steps for that.
Those key things: data,
Yeah.
collaborative team,
Yeah.
or community network team,
Yeah.
are all falling in place. So
Yeah.
we're laying a good groundwork for the future.
So that's kind of actually hitting two targets for the Homeless No More strategy. One would be that communications piece, and the other one is the evaluation piece that we wanted to work on this year.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And in a sense, Engage Nova Scotia is paving the way to have the right kind of conversation in each community about safe spaces, about safe couch surfing, or the risks of couch surfing and the alternative couch surfing. And I think it's going to begin to rally people, which is really what we need, and we've been seeing happen. So also, Kelly, give us an update on host homes, and also what's been happening on housing with your work with landlords, because that's been a real boost.
Well, host homes slowed down a little bit during COVID, mostly because people didn't want to do a lot of the in-person stuff because of COVID, which makes sense. But there were still some applications that came in. So we had about 4 new applications come in, and those kind of got stagnated. But they're kind of back up and running now. One actually just got approved last week, so we can move somebody in there shortly. But what we had to do was kind of shift a little bit into how we were going to house youth, because we knew host homes wasn't going to be a very viable option during COVID. So we started approaching landlords and saying, if we agree to provide heavy supervision, could we have the lease sign or have the youth
heavy
sign
or
lease.
Thorough supervision?
Thorough supervision.
I'm thinking heavy?
Yeah, thorough supervision. And they agreed. So from the time that started at the beginning of, I would say, March till now, we have 9 youth housed in like permanent housing with lease leases, and it's actually going really well. There's been a few minor complaints that have been easily resolved, and the landlords seem to be very happy with the way that we're working with the clients and the kind of peace of mind they have about who's in the unit, and they've agreed to continually keep giving us more as long as we're following kind of what we've been doing.
It really illustrates that for our youth we need to provide multiple options. So it's great that you've been coordinating these pieces, and there's almost enough work for a few other people, but we're looking now, you and I have been working on the different housing models that we can look at, and who would be the stakeholders that would have ownership of those different models, and who would they fit, because one size doesn't fit all, and we feel like there's a good climate right now to be hearing that, and so we got to keep talking to Nova Scotia Housing and AHONS and other partners provincially, so that we can also connect with the national partners for that reaching home dollars, which is so crucial, because ultimately it's going to mean we have to build or renovate spaces so that youth can live with a family, with an adult, or with support.
That's actually one other thing that we started to kind of see if we could try something new, is working with Dave Brewster actually to see if we can get some renovation money, because we have some host homes that want to host but they don't have the appropriate space, but with a little bit of renovations to create that separate bedroom and like the proper windows and things like that, then we might be able to increase the number of host homes.
So thanks to Acadia, for now doing this every 2 years and being committed to that. So we really appreciate the community development program and their part. So thanks to Mary Sweet for that.
You've been doing a lot of work on youth in transition. So there's a lot of youth we work with that have been involved in the child welfare system, in care, and there's a higher representation of youth in care that are experience homelessness after. So you've been doing some work on that.
Yeah, it was a really great opportunity, and again it hit just after COVID. I was asked to be part of a provincial task force, you could call it, and it's to develop a framework for youth in care as they're transitioning out of care. And so we really dug in to look at definitions, to look at philosophy of approach. And I was encouraged. It was like a lengthy progress. People sometimes wonder what I'm doing all the time. 2 hours a week for who knows how many weeks. We worked on this together, lots of people on the call. But what resulted was a whole new framework, a whole new program. It's like a youth outreach program, but for kids that are in foster care or group homes, and they're transitioning out of that and wanting to reach maturity. And they sound like great terms, but it's really true. And so I felt like there was a listening ear. I felt like it was going to be far more relationally based, less bureaucratic, yet still diligent in terms of the right stuff being completed, and a renewed sense of partnership between youth outreach programs provincially and child welfare. And so I don't know exactly how it's going to be rolled out. It would probably be inappropriate for me to guess because it's not my call. I just contributed. But it sort of mirrors our youth outreach program. And so it's going to be pretty neat. It's going to be for youth that are in care. It's not for just any youth that's 12 to 15, but it's definitely aiming younger. One of the outcomes of it is a youth could be connected to a youth outreach worker or a program from the age of 12 to 24. Which seems like a really long time, but when you're talking about someone that's been abandoned by the system and no family, or not abandoned by the system, but raised by the system and maybe abandoned by family, that's fairly significant. And so we recognize as Homeless No More and also nationally that that's a really vulnerable population. They are the most missed in a sense because you can't go from institutional care to organic life in the community. It just doesn't work, and so you have to reframe all that. So that's been worked on. That work is going to impact our regular ongoing youth outreach work. And so it's like all these wonderful streams have been coming together, and I feel like we've just been sort of either cheerleaders or part of the orchestra, really. But I think it's because Homeless No More was a spark, was a catalyst. And Kelly, I want to say thanks to you, because in so many of these areas, you have the tenacity to be determined to make sure people are in meetings and get information and things are getting done. So I really appreciate that, and it's been really good. We look forward to, at the next Homeless No More meeting, really drilling down into the housing strategy and the housing options, because I think now we need to put some you could say leverage or influence or efforts into really seeing a solid housing strategy as part of Homeless No More. And while these other pieces continue to develop. So that's what we're looking forward to.
I think would be good to touch on is what Rachel has been doing with the town of Kentville Rec. So basically during COVID, they have totally dismantled how they've provided services before and refocused and reshifted everything to be all about kind of the user experience and with the goal of just reduce barriers and community inclusion. And so that ties into that youth in transition piece is how do you go from this institutional setting into the community? But when recreation departments, especially the town of Kentville, is starting to shift their models, it makes a lot of that easier when they reduce all the barriers. And so if you get a chance to ask Rachel, I would ask her.
Well, maybe at the meeting she could not only describe what they've done, but describe how we can help impact other municipalities to follow suit, because we want to see that across the board. And so I think it means reshaping what our focus is for the next year or two. Because lots has changed and it needs to be a dynamic, evolving plan and strategy. So that's, I think, where we're at, is refocusing that strategy. Because there's been some wonderful successes and progress.
I think the only other update would be about the trafficking and exploitation support services group. So that was something else that kind of popped up was the YWCA got some funding to help resolve youth trafficking and exploitation. And so regionally, each region now has a working group for what does that look like in each area. And so we're starting to chair the local group here. And our focuses are going to be around housing, surprise, surprise, and also prevention. And so how do we get that information into the schools to make sure youth understand what even is exploitation, what do we mean by that, what does grooming look like, and so that's kind of where that's at too. So I don't know where that fits in, but it's something we're working on.
Very related to the whole thing. That's awesome. Anyway, looking forward to the next meeting.
Yes.